This is a world overrun by zombies, where only a few survivors eke out an existence within a military base. In the midst of this, a group of children is tightly bound to their seats. Helen, a kind teacher, saw how intelligent Melanie was and touched her head. An officer quickly rushed in to stop Helen. He rolls up his sleeve and wipes off the gel that masks his scent, then extends his arm toward a young boy. In the next instant, as the scent spreads, the children's faces contort into eerie expressions. It turns out these children are descendants of zombies. The surviving humans have kept them captive to study a vaccine for the zombie virus. Their daily sustenance consists of live maggots, and they are subjected to daily infusion of human knowledge. Helen, seeing that the situation was getting out of hand, shouted at SGT Parks to stop his actions. SGT Parks then returned to the room with the children.
What are you looking at?
If I had a box full of all the evils in the world, I'd stick you inside and close the lid.
This remark infuriates SGT Parks, and he intentionally leaves Melanie bound as he exits the room. Later that night, during Helen's rounds, she finds Melanie still tied to the chair. After unsuccessful attempts to call out, she opens the door and releases Melanie from her restraints, but the smell of Helen's body aroused Melanie.
No! Get out!
Struggling to maintain her sanity, Melanie drives Helen out. The following day, Melanie waits for the soldiers to take her to class as usual, but this time, SGT Parks escorts Melanie outside the base. This is Melanie's first glimpse of the outside world. Beyond the solid iron fence, a mass of bodies was advancing. Soldiers frantically machine-gunned. Subsequently, Melanie is led into a laboratory. The base is on the brink of collapse, and Melanie represents the closest thing to a normal human among the zombie descendants. Dr. Caroline wants to seize the last minute to develop a vaccine. When the nurse injects Melanie with the drug, she falls asleep on the operating table. With everything set, just as Dr. Caroline is about to proceed, Helen suddenly appears, wielding a fire extinguisher to halt the surgery. In Helen's eyes, these zombie offspring are no different from human beings, and she doesn't want Melanie to die. Seeing Helen's unwavering resolve, Dr. Caroline puts down the surgical instrument, feigning compromise, and convinces Helen to lower the fire extinguisher. Dr. Caroline took a spray and sprayed Helen with it, then called the soldiers to take Helen away. Dr. Caroline turned around, intending to resume the surgery, but at that moment, the alarm suddenly blared. Evidently, the zombies had infiltrated the base. However, Dr. Caroline still wants to continue the operation. The nurse reluctantly followed Dr. Caroline's orders and lowered the window barrier. Unexpectedly, a zombie smashed through the glass and clamped its teeth onto the nurse's arm. Dr. Caroline grabbed a fire extinguisher and smashed the zombie's head, then picked up the glass shards and killed the zombie. The sharp shards penetrated into the zombie's body and also cut Dr. Caroline's palm. Meanwhile, the bitten nurse began to mutate. Dr. Caroline could only hide in a side room. Melanie has the zombie gene, so the zombies won't attack her. Melanie picked up a scalpel to cut the restraints and escaped from the lab. By this point, the base was swarming with zombies, relentlessly attacking the surrounding soldiers. When the soldiers escorting Helen saw Melanie escaping, they wanted to shoot her, but Helen stopped them in time. When Melanie saw Helen being beaten, she jumped on the soldiers without thinking. After killing the two soldiers, Melanie whimpered and fell asleep. Helen immediately got up and picked up Melanie and fled to an armored car, thus escaping from the zombies. Dr. Caroline was also hiding in the armored car, which made Melanie very nervous. Eventually, the armored vehicle came to a stop in the wilderness. Sergeant Parks also noticed Melanie in the vehicle. SGT Parks wanted to kill Melanie, but Helen stopped him and let Melanie go. The group decided to make their way to another base named Lighthouse. Dr. Caroline asserted that Melanie still held value and must be taken along. Sergeant Parks had Melanie wear a mask and be tethered to the roof of the vehicle as they set out. While they stopped midway to replenish their water supplies, they heard some movement coming from the nearby bushes. Without hesitation, Dylan opened fire, unleashing a barrage of bullets into the foliage. However, the gunshots quickly attracted a horde of zombies. Several people quickly shot at the zombies. Sergeant Parks shoots like a god, hitting the zombie in the head continuously. Tragically, Dylan was tackled by a zombie and bitten. With a heavy heart, Sergeant Parks had no choice but to dispatch Dylan with a single shot. Due to the chaos of the recent battle, the car's fuel tank was inadvertently damaged, forcing the group to continue on foot. Before long, they reached a city. its streets densely populated with zombies. These zombies rely on their sense of smell and hearing to recognize movement. As long as they put on odor-blocking gel and move carefully, they won't wake up the zombies. As they were about to navigate through the zombie horde, a female zombie pushing a baby carriage slowly approached. Dr. Caroline noticed the zombie's peculiar behavior and extended her foot to block the baby carriage. Dr. Caroline's screams wake up the female zombie, and SGT Parks can only shoot the zombie to death. However, the gunshots alerted even more zombies, forcing them to eliminate zombies while swiftly moving away. They eventually sought refuge in a large building. Helen and Sergeant Parks scoured the building to ensure it was zombie-free. At this moment, Melanie inquired of Dr. Caroline about her true nature. Dr. Caroline disclosed a brutal truth. Children like Melanie were the result of infected pregnant mothers passing the zombie fungus to their unborn infants. Upon reaching full term, these infants would devour their mother's organs until they saw the sky. Despite carrying the zombie fungus, such children could communicate and learn like regular humans. Dr. Caroline believed that studying these zombie descendants might hold the key to developing a cure against the zombie fungus. Hence, they were confined in the base for observation and study. But Melanie couldn't accept the answer. The following day, the area outside the building was swarmed with zombies due to the previous commotion. They were trapped inside the building. Melanie volunteers to go out and distract the zombies. Dr. Caroline was the first to object when she heard that she was afraid that Melanie would go away and never come back. However, as long as Helen is still here, Melanie will definitely come back. Soon Melanie is out of the building. Due to her carrying the zombie fungus, the outside zombies perceived her as one of their own. A passing cat provided a meal for the famished Melanie. She then entered a house, curiously examining the unfamiliar surroundings. Throughout her memories, she had only known the cold iron gates, so everything around her was intriguing. Melanie soon encountered a small dog and carried it back to the zombie horde. The hungry zombies quickly chased after the dog, allowing the group to escape. They eventually reached another street and discovered peculiar plants growing from within zombie bodies. Further down the road, they encountered a massive tree formed from countless zombie corpses. Dr. Caroline explained that this marked the final stage of the zombie fungus. When the fruits on the tree bloomed, spores would disperse into the air. Breathing in these spores would cause humans to mutate into zombies. Dr. Caroline emphasized that the fruits were impervious to physical force but highly sensitive to temperature and humidity. A flood or fire would trigger the release of spores. Later on, they stumbled upon a mobile laboratory, equipped with everything necessary for experiments except for the actual specimens. Once settled, Kieran ventured out to find food. Driven by hunger, Melanie's hunger pangs struck and she went out looking for food. However, right after Melanie finished devouring a pigeon, she spotted a group of zombie children. Without any civilizing influence, these children had regressed to primitive behavior, resembling wild beings. Melanie had a bad feeling when she saw the leader of the kids. She raced back to the base to inform Helen and Sergeant Parks that Kieran might be in danger of being treated as food by this group of children. They immediately set out to rescue Kieran. Meanwhile, Kieran, who had been fruitlessly scavenging for food, suddenly stumbled upon a can on the ground. Picking it up, he rounded a corner and found another can. This pattern continued until he reached a house. However, the rolling shutter left only a small gap. Kieran dropped his gear and squeezed inside. Inside, Kieran discovered an abundance of food. As he indulged himself, a zombie child appeared, holding a dead rat and offering it to Kieran. Kieran's pissed off at this kid. There's plenty of food here, and the kid insists that Kieran eat a dead mouse. Next moment, by the time Melanie and the others arrived, Kieran was already eaten to the bone. As they stepped outside, the zombie children closed in around them. It was a trap. Sergeant Parks drew his gun, intending to eliminate the zombie children, but Melanie intervened, stopping him. Melanie is going to stop the zombie kids in her own way. After Melanie successfully intimidated the surrounding zombie children, she engaged in a duel with their leader. Melanie can't beat the leader of the zombie kids, but she is able to trap him with her intelligence, and then she kills the leader of the zombie kids with a few strikes. Witnessing this, the other zombie children refrained from approaching Helen and the group. Once they escaped, upon entering the laboratory, they were ambushed by Dr. Caroline's drugged attack, rendering them unconscious. It turns out Dr. Caroline's wound had become infected, and her time was running short. She aimed to dissect Melanie within her remaining time to develop a vaccine, but Melanie, who was unconscious, suddenly woke up. She had held her breath when Dr. Caroline sprayed the drugs and had only pretended to be unconscious to deceive her. Dr. Caroline then tried to persuade Melanie. She informed Melanie that dissecting her could save Helen. Given the importance of Helen, Melanie reluctantly agreed to the surgery proposed by Dr. Caroline. When Melanie was about to untie her shoes and lie on the operating table, she suddenly asked Dr. Caroline a question.
We're alive?
Yes. You're alive.
Then why should it be us who die for you?
Melanie tied her shoes and left the lab without looking back. Dr. Caroline rushed after her, only to be surrounded by the earlier group of zombie children. Meanwhile, Melanie reached the massive zombie tree and ignited it with a struck match. As the flames consumed the tree, the spores within the fruits rapidly dispersed into the air. At this moment, Sergeant Parks, who had been concerned for Melanie's safety, arrived. Having spent many days together, Sergeant Parks had come to view Melanie as a normal human being. If his daughter were alive, she would be Melanie's age. Melanie was overwhelmed with guilt. She had intended for Helen and Sergeant Parks to remain safe in the laboratory, but Sergeant Parks had ventured out to find her. Sergeant Parks took out his gun and implored Melanie to end his life to prevent him from turning into a zombie. Witnessing Sergeant Parks' agony, Melanie had no choice but to bid him farewell before he could transform. Helen awoke from her slumber as the spores filled the sky. Looking at Melanie outside the quarantine door, she realized everything. The end of the human race is sooner or later. The world is now more suitable for these zombie descendants, or more suitable for these new humans. What Helen can do now is to teach them human knowledge to continue the civilization's legacy.